Welcome to BUEI Talks Island SOS. I am Hannah Horsfield, your host for today's presentation. This is an 8-part series focusing on innovative, sustainable ocean development initiatives in island nations around the globe. Each presentation covers a different island topic, highlights the unique perspective and involvement that the islands have had on ocean conservation, and showcases the different practices they've undertaken to safeguard their surrounding ocean. BUEI appreciates the generous support of Chubb Bermuda, the exclusive sponsor for this series. Island SOS aligns with Chubb's mission to promote a healthy, sustainable planet, strengthen the resilience of communities, and protect biodiversity strength against the effects of climate change. Today is our 5th Sustainable Ocean Strategy presentation, and we're focusing on the Isle of Man. Like Bermuda, the Isle of Man is a self-governing British Crown dependency. It sits in the Irish Sea between England and Ireland and is known for its rugged coastline, medieval castles, and rural landscape which arises to a mountainous peak. Unlike any other islands, the Isle of Man was designated as a UNESCO Biosphere in 2016. Its recognition of its special environment, culture, heritage, and environment, and its people's desire to cherish and nurture them. As of June 2021, the Isle is the only entire nation biosphere, and all their land and territorial seas are included. The designation can be attributed in large part to Bill Dale, who's the founder and executive director of Beach Buddies, a charity running more than 200 beach cleanups a year to ensure the island's coastline is one of the cleanest in Europe. Bill launched the charity in 2007 and is now 12,000 registered volunteers, amounting to approximately 14% of the island's population. The UNESCO status, granted in 2016, recognized their collective efforts of an outstanding example of a place where people and nature work in harmony. Welcome, Bill. Being a passionate beachcomber myself, I'm curious to know as to when you really noticed the beach debris, plastic debris becoming an issue on the beaches in the Isle of Man.
Oh, I'll be honest with you. I didn't really notice it until I started walking my dogs on the beach, and dogs have a habit of looking for interesting things, while human beings tend to walk in the water, and paddle amongst the waves. And we followed the dogs to see that they were picking up, and they actually brought back bottles of very old plastic bottles to us. So we went up to the high water mark, and in amongst all the sand dunes and the rushes, there was an unbelievable quantity of plastic. So that was in 2006. And to be honest, since that day, I've not stopped cleaning beaches. It's been a life-changing moment.
Oh, that's really awesome. We like to hear that you enjoy cleaning the beaches, and it sounds like you guys have done an incredible job, and we're excited to hear what you're going to share with us today.
Yeah. Well, as I say, it started in 2006. There were only two people, myself and a good friend. And as I say, we were walking the dogs. So on that very first weekend, we decided that we would come back and have a look and bring some carrier bags with us, some bin bags. So we started filling, and then we realized as we were going along that there was even more plastic than we'd possibly imagined. And every weekend for 6 weekends, we went back and we kept account. And I'm a journalist by trade, so statistics and photographs make a difference. So I took photographs and I had statistics. I do apologize for the photographs not being on the screen, but the Isle of Man's technology sometimes is not very good here. But we collected in 6 weekends 30,000 plastic bottles and items of plastic. And we realized then that this wasn't just like something that needs tidying up. This was a serious pollution problem. And at the end of the 6 weeks, we thought we'd try some other beaches. So we have 100 miles of coastline here. About a third of it is rocks and cliffs, but the rest of it is sandy beaches. And we've got some beautiful stretches of beach here. And we started to tackle it. And eventually, in a short period of time, it was just me and the dogs. And I'll be honest with you, there was a stigma attached, and I think there still is to some extent, a stigma attached to picking up other people's trash. And because of that, I didn't really tell anybody what I was doing with my weekends. And then in the end, you realize that it was just such a hopeless task for one person and 5 dogs. So I put out a press release, and within 2 weeks, we had 80 volunteers. And by the end of the first year, we had 1,500 volunteers. And then we started an education program in schools. And then we just started talking to people. And then we found that people wanted to help us. So we placed our own special Beach Buddies bins around the coastline. And amazingly, the public decided that they would like to fill the Beach Buddies bin rather than the local authority bin, because they felt like it was their bin rather than it was the government's bin. And that has been a major success story. And that led to us being able to attract some income. It's never enough, as always, and we do need to address that at some point in the future. But we have a very successful system. We've taken on a part-time member of staff who now empties those bins. But the real key to what we've done on top of all of this, cleaning beaches is really good thing to do, but you have to think about, where does all this trash come from? Now, what is the point of picking up trash on beaches and then not thinking about how to stop it getting there in the first place? And by going around schools and thinking this through and researching this as much as I could on the internet, the simple fact is that if you drop a piece of trash anywhere, you could be thousands of miles from the beach. You could drop it anywhere and it'll go down a river. It'll go down a drain first. It'll go into a stream, into a river, and it ends up on the beach. And that is now the absolute core of what we're talking about. So I spend, and it is the most rewarding part of what I do, I spend my time talking to schools, and particularly to primary school children between the ages of 4 and 11, but also to secondary school children. And the wonderful thing that happens is that when we have our regular beach cleaning sessions for all volunteers at weekends, the children come along, and I recognize the faces of the children, and they've come along and they've brought mom and dad, and they indirectly, and I had no idea this was going to happen, but the children are now educating the parents, and then the parents start coming along, and it becomes a family activity. And this is what was recognized when UNESCO Biosphere gave us the Biosphere Reserve status in 2016-17. And as it happened, I'm a photographer as well as a journalist. So as it happened, I was given the paid job of taking the photographs of the award of the certificate. And Dr. Han Chun Lee, who was the head of Biosphere in UNESCO in Paris, he stood up. And he'd been to see us in the afternoon. He'd been on a tour of the Isle of Man, but he'd actually come down to the beach to talk to our organization. And on the night, he specifically mentioned, and we were the only ones who were mentioned, he said, one of the main reasons why we've given you this award is because of the activities of Beach Buddies, because what you have here is ultra, ultra special. This is something that's not happening anywhere else in the world. And you know what? I could hardly take the photographs. There was a shiver running down my spine, because I didn't know he was going to say this. And from that moment on, that gave us massive credibility, and we won all sorts of awards. And National Geographic have interviewed us, and we've been featured on BBC World News. And in the space of 1 year, we had 300 million online viewers. I mean, this is just figures out of all proportion. And now we've been asked to join all sorts of committees on things like environmental issues, on recycling, on use of single-use plastics. On the back of it, the government has introduced a single-use plastic ban for all government departments. And suddenly, what we did by me walking on a beach with some dogs all those years ago has ended up in a massive restructure of the way the Isle of Man thinks about the world. And we've set, thank goodness, it appears to be a worldwide standard. The fact that you guys are now sitting listening to this guy in a little cottage in a little place like the Isle of Man, and you guys are listening, and people in the States have invited me. I've been to Youngstown University, and I've been to Monterey University, and I'm speaking all the time to everybody around the world. And we've got branches in Hong Kong, across Europe, Canada, Australia. I mean, suddenly this is starting to take off. And I really believe that little islands like ours and yours and all the nations, that's all the little islands around the world. And particularly, I'm really keen that we follow up that the fact that the Isle of Man and Bermuda are both members of the Island Games Sports Association, and that we meet every 4 years and compete in a friendly way with each other. And there is a fantastic network around that. And we've got something special which we could actually do around the world. And when you look at a map of the world with all of the branches of the Island Games Association, this is a pretty impressive situation. And I think islands are special because we're affected mostly by plastic pollution and other sorts of pollution. And if we were to get together, I am absolutely convinced that we could do something which could send a message to all the nations in the world that this situation with plastics being dumped in the ocean and nobody being made accountable has to change. Otherwise, we are going to kill the planet. We're going to kill the animals in the sea. We're going to kill all the fish. I mean, it's already proved that there's plastic in every single fish. And you know, we're in a situation where I think we could do something special. And we have in the Isle of Man somehow stumbled on the answer. And now we have, I heard earlier on that I think you said that we had 13,000 volunteers. It is now 17,000 in a population of 84,000. And I know for a fact that there's at least that many again. I saw a guy only yesterday, I'd never seen him before, and he's walking down the road in his local area with a bag and a litter picker. This is what's happened in the Isle of Man. It changes the culture. Everybody has taken it on board, and our communication has worked because we use the media. We've got a good relationship with government. We have companies who sponsor us, but most importantly, we've got the schools. And I honestly, I could end up with a full-time job in the schools. I spend all my time talking to children in schools, and it is the most rewarding thing. And we debate in a constructive way. We're very positive, but we try to come out, instead of being negative and saying, you know, this is wrong, that's wrong, don't do this, don't do that. What we're saying is, okay, we've got some things wrong, but guess what? If we do some things right, you can change things, and then you can make life better for your children. You can make life better for your animals. You can make life better for the world and set an example. So what I would like to say today is that I really think that Bermuda and the Isle of Man should get together, and we should do something to set a standard amongst the island games nations, and we will be the first two to do this. And let's go forward and let's make a change using our example. And I'm not naive enough to think that there will be other very clever ideas come along as well, which we could add to it. But this very simple system of cleaning beaches with volunteers, where everybody seems to enjoy it. You know, nobody thinks it's a bad thing to do, or everybody seems to enjoy it. It's also a leveler for people who are maybe socially not, you know, don't interact too well, and for children with learning difficulties who we talk to a lot. But this is a very simple activity which has made a huge difference to the Isle of Man. And my proposal today is that Bermuda and the Isle of Man should get together, and let's set an example and spread this word around the world. Now, I could
Yeah.
speak for a lot longer, but I know you guys will probably have lots of very difficult questions, and I promise to try to answer them all.
Yes, if anybody has any questions, we've actually have a visitor here today who is also from the Isle of Man, who's come out to watch you, which is really awesome, and hear
Really?
about
Who's
it.
that?
Yes, I will go around and ask them some questions
Okay.
in a second. But I just had another question for you. I applaud this, you going into the schools and teaching the kids and how they were then also bringing that home. And that's something that we're really trying to do here as well. And inspire our youth who will, you know, it's like a trickle on effect. But did you get volunteers? Were they just all of a sudden rolling? Like you went into the schools and the parents did it, but I'm curious as to how quickly you went from just like a small group of you to like when you really started to expand greatly.
I
Like how
think
did
we were very fortunate to be in at the very, very early stages of when the occasional documentary appeared on TV or on Netflix
right?
about pollution in the waters. And when we came on live with it, because of my media background, I I understood how to write a story for obvious reasons. And I knew some of the people in the media, but not only did they not think did they think it was a good story, it actually resonated with them themselves because in the Isle of Man, and like any island like Bermuda, we all spend time on beaches and on the coast.
Yeah.
That's just the way that we all are. If you live in an island, you can't avoid the coast, even if you wanted to.
Yeah.
So the trash is sitting there, ready to be picked up. And to be honest, around the world, and in the Isle of Man in 2006, that was what was happening. Nobody was doing anything about it.
Oh,
So for somebody to just have a go, everybody thought all the first 80 who came along in the 2 weeks, they were, without question, they were sitting on their seats at home waiting for something to happen, hopefully and I think that hopefully from individuals rather than from government, because when somebody from government says, we need to clean up our beaches, what people's reaction to that
yeah.
would be: we're not going to do that because that should be your job.
Yeah.
And people are very quick to blame governments for everything. In reality, this is one of the things on the planet which is caused entirely by human beings.
Yeah.
This is our fault. Every single one of us. I mean, I have to say, my parents drilled it into us. We never dropped trash in the street ever. But
Yeah.
there is, without question, this is a public problem caused by the public, which needs to be addressed by the public. Okay, governments, I have to say, have helped us along the way, but this is something that we caused, and therefore I feel it's a responsibility for us to do something about it.
Right. And that's definitely the case here in Bermuda as well. Most of the trash that you see on the Isle of Man is transboundary, yes? So the plastic that's washing up, do you think is more from what's circulating in the North Atlantic Gyre?
Yes,
Or is it more, because I mean, here in Bermuda, in our case, it's much more transboundary, so coming from all over, not so much our own
yes.
pollution.
Well,
Um,
the Atlantic Ocean has got a southwest prevalation. So the prevailing winds are southwest. So
okay.
we've had messages in a bottle from Newfoundland. We've had items which are clearly from the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Things like uh, coconuts, large coconuts, not the sort of thing you find in a supermarket, but in its shell,
Yes.
um, and all sorts of items which are clearly from the Caribbean. And then there's labels
Right. I
on
see
some
that
of the
too.
things that we find. Plastic bottles in particular retain their labels quite well, and they're coming all the way from down your way. A lot of them from South America, because and you think about it, the first place that it hits land is pretty much Ireland, UK, and then up the channel in the Isle of Man, and we've had a lot of that. Having said that, we also get a lot from Ireland.
Right.
So there's a lot of trash with Irish names on it, things like milk cartons and
Right.
and bottles which are plastic bottles which are clearly come from Ireland. Having said that, the trash that we're throwing in our rivers is ending up, and I personally did this. I went across to Blackpool, which is about 60 miles due east of the Isle of Man, and I walked along the beach there one day and picked up an Isle of Man milk carton.
Oh,
So, there's and that makes you humble, really, because it makes you think that we've got something to answer for as well. So everybody's got to think about it. But I have to say, I was beginning to lose faith in people generally this
I
last
understand
15,
that.
20 years, and particularly the last 4 or 5 years. But when I started Beach Buddies, and you realize that there are far, far more decent people out there in the world than you
Yeah.
actually imagine. It's just that the most decent people are actually quite quiet and
Yeah.
gentle, and they don't want to make a noise. So I look on it that I'm the person making the noise on their behalf.
Oh, good. I'm a little bit curious. I wanted to know about this, so the operation side of what you're doing, and like how do you guys take numbers? So the measurements and the reporting. What is your method
Okay,
there?
right. Okay, we recycle pretty much everything that
Oh, wow.
can be recycled in the Isle of Man. So that's things like glass, tin cans, metals, hard plastics, and that's pretty much as 4 or 5 items. There's not a huge number. then we have very, very conveniently, and I have to give tribute to the government for this. About 20 years ago, we invested heavily in an energy from waste plant, which is the technology that's used across Scandinavia. And you must have it, I imagine,
We have
somewhere
one
in the
as
States.
well, yes.
And they burn trash without any pollution going into the atmosphere. There's a small amount of bottom ash which has to go to landfill. But prior to that, we were just digging holes in the ground like the majority of the world is doing and throwing it into a landfill. Now that's stopped
Sure.
now, must be 20 years. But the great thing about that is when we take our items down there, they weigh it. So we get a little ticket every time we go through the place. So we're able to weigh it. And we keep a record of the number of volunteers, how much rubbish they collect, how many new volunteers turn up. And because I'm a journalist, then I've done that statistically since the beginning, thank goodness.
Oh, cool.
And as I say, we're about 17,200 volunteers since 2006. In a population of 84,000, it's staggering.
That is staggering. And what do you have any numbers that you can give us of how much pollution they've collected, or is
It's in terms of quantity, plastic without question.
right?
Quantity, it's plastic. By I would say 80% of what we collect is plastic.
Yes.
Another 5% is fishing gear like nets and fish boxes and things like that. Another 5% is things like tin cans, um,
Okay.
but they break down more so than plastic. And then the glass bottles that we find, I have to say, is probably only about 2%, but that's normally human beings going for a barbecue on the beach and
Yeah.
sadly just
More
trashing
local.
it or smashing them on the beach.
Yeah.
Um, but we have a recycling system inland now as well, and that's just taken off in the last 6 months, and that is working as well. And that's never been tried before. A proper
And what are they
recycling.
recycling? It's the
I'm
hard
sorry.
plastic? They recycle the hard plastic there?
Yeah, we do recycle hard plastics. Our difficulty is, and I'm sure you'll find this being on an island, is that the transport costs to get it to a plant to recycle it properly into a
Yeah.
reusable material is expensive. There has been talk about having a centre here where we would particularly recycle plastics and then turn it into items which would replace things like wooden fencing. And in all of our areas, we have in our island all over the place, we have glens and gates and things which need replacing. So why not replace them with plastic rather than timber? But that's a little way down the line, I think.
Yeah. Um, so I'm gonna ask you what suggestions you have for Bermuda, but before I do that, I'd really like to know exactly what the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve entails and what that award really means for you guys. And does it need to be renewed annually, or I mean, obviously you get
It's
global
re-
recognition, but
okay. When you first receive it, it's awarded for 10 years. So we are coming up to, well, we're over just halfway now, and the plan is that we would you have to resubmit. You don't resubmit your application, but you have to update them. So there is there's an accountability for having this, and I think without question they expect that we don't just sit on our laurels and tell the world we've got UNESCO Biosphere status. You have to progress from where you were and to try and do better. I think we could be doing better. I think for the first couple of years of having it, it really, really quite surprised the Isle of Man, I think, because this work was done behind the scenes, not by government, but
right,
by a man who used to be part of and is still, but he's the ex-chairman of UNESCO Biosphere, and he, by chance, he's from Australia, and he bought a house in the Isle of Man, and he put it forward that we should be nominated, and that's how that came about. But I think we should be doing more, because I think when you get the honor of this, because it's not that common a thing, is that you should use it as a springboard to move forward. And I think we've done a fair bit, but I think we should be doing more. Um, you know what it's like around the world. Everybody's talking about money, but the
right,
reality is we should be talking about the place that we live in and the damage that we are doing to the planet. So, and this is a very personal thing for me, but I think we're falling short on that basis everywhere around the world.
yeah,
And that, I think UNESCO Biosphere is a wonderful organization, because they are trying to promote a better world for everybody, not just for people who've got money.
right. And then so you're keeping a portfolio going, or you're
Yes,
tracking your
yes.
stages so that you can be nominated again?
Yeah,
Is that you that's doing that?
if you Google us on Beach Buddies, then you'll find beachbuddies.net, and we have our regular reports on there. I mean, it's still quite parochial, you know. It's obviously still about the Isle of Man, but there are sometimes some pretty worldwide, staggering stories on there. And to be honest, being invited by you guys to talk is an honor for us. It's really nice that you guys have found out about what we're doing, and you've taken an interest. And I am very, very grateful for the fact that you've given us this opportunity. I really want to thank you for that. But as I said at the end of the presentation, this is an opportunity. You know, this is a chance for us to do something, not
Yeah.
just pat each other on the shoulder and say, you know, well done. And yeah, I know you've applied for biosphere status. Is that right?
I can't really speak on
Or
that
or
exact.
or is Bermuda on the list? It may well be.
Potentially, we have a Keep Bermuda Beautiful team here, a task force that is dedicated to cleaning our beaches, and they
Yes.
also go into the schools, and so they're doing quite
Yeah.
a good job of it. But
Yeah.
do you have any suggestions for what we can do here in Bermuda? I mean, I like this idea of us collaborating with the Isle of
Yes.
Man, but
Yes.
what would be the beginning of that, or
Well, the
um,
number two, and I've said this quite a few times, the key is education. I mean,
right?
whatever happens around the world, and in terms of the publicity that you get, nothing compares to changing a generation's feeling about the
Yes,
future. And I think without question that's happened here. I didn't expect that. Even if I tried to do that, I wouldn't have expected to be so successful. But one of the key things for me is that, and because of my background, you must inform the media, and you must keep them on
yes,
side. And I know that you guys have
absolutely.
arranged two very interesting interviews I had this week with your newspapers, and media outlets. Without question, the media made a difference because they also understood that this was actually quite a good story for the Isle of Man, and it's interesting. I know it's, you know, you think about it, it's all about trash and killing, and you know, animals dying because of the trash. But if you think that people are coming up with a solution to try to solve that, then that becomes a very positive thing, and it's not all negative all the time. You know, you listen to the news these days, and I think people's span of attention is dying because after 5 minutes you feel like slitting your throat. You know,
Totally.
there's the corruption and absolute obsession with money and politicians is just crazy. Whereas the planet is dying around ourselves. It's just dying around us, and we're not doing enough about it. So maybe there's scope for a new TV station which just looks at those things.
I'm gonna have the microphone go around and see if anybody else has
Okay,
any questions for you.
okay.
And yeah, we awesome.
Right. Any questions from the audience? Yeah.
Not too difficult.
Hi, Bill. I'm
Hello.
I'm Karen from the Isle of Man.
Hello, Karen.
Yeah,
What's
hi
your
there.
what's your Isle of Man surname?
Lomas.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice to speak to you.
Yeah. Great to see you and great to hear your story. And it's completely new to me, but it
Thank
seems
you.
like a name of Beach Buddies Bermuda just runs off your lips.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The moment that these guys phoned to say, "Would you give a presentation?" I immediately thought Beach Buddies Bermuda is just so easy.
It
It's
is.
so
It's
easy.
so easy. And I think maybe to start in the schools. And the other thought that I had was that we do have rambling clubs. And
Yes.
maybe the rambling clubs, the walking clubs, could identify the beaches as uh, you know, their point of interest on their walks and do that plastic collection at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. We have I established a group on the back of Beach Buddies called Footpath Friends, which is, you know, obviously taking, so it's close enough, and another alliteration, and that worked very well because our footpaths, government funding for these sort of things doesn't work too well, and that worked very well because I think people who care about beaches and pollution are also obviously care about the rest of our island. It's not just about beaches. So when we came up with that idea, that worked very well too. And I know that probably I would say 20% of our volunteers clean up around their local homes and not on the beach at all. Um, and how cool is that? Because that makes the place look even better. So we are trying very hard to tackle this entire problem at source. So yeah, that's a very good idea.
Any other questions? Yeah. Good afternoon. My name's Patrice, and I live here in Bermuda. Can you hear me all
Hi.
right?
Yes, I
Uh,
can. Yeah.
I think it's a bit of the 80-20 rule. There's a lot of people who do a lot. There's Keep Bermuda Beautiful, and I know I lived up in Somerset. I used to live near the public dock, and after a weekend, just tons of things would flow up onto our shore because people would just leave their trash. And it
Yes.
seems to be a very small percentage of people that are still not doing their part. And they may not be people who feel particularly encompassed by our community. They
Yes.
feel
Yeah.
left out, so they don't feel it's part of their, part of their world. It's somebody else's problem. I don't know how you get to that. I mean, education is part of it, but it seems to be a bigger problem, and they're causing a lot of the problem from
I
my
would agree with
perspective.
that entirely, and I think there's about 5% of the population who just simply don't care, and I think quite a few of those are young boys, young lads, between maybe the ages of, I don't know, 15 and 20, or maybe a little bit older, who they want to rebel a little bit, and they look on throwing trash out of the car window as being pretty clever. Um, but the way that we need to stop that, and we don't do it in the Isle of Man yet, but the way to stop that, the only way I can think is accountability. There is a very clever piece of software around being developed at the moment, which when you buy something from, say, a takeaway, um, there's like an identity of the person who's bought it with their card goes onto the item that they bought, and then when it's thrown out of the car window, you can find out who's actually bought it. Um, and I think the reason why young boys in particular throw trash out the window is because nobody ever gets caught. Nobody gets there's no penalty for it. There are no consequences. So consequently, why would they ever dream of stopping doing that? And I think that needs to be addressed worldwide, not just in the Isle of Man. It needs to be everywhere. I think we have to accept that there will always be some people who will throw trash in the street, and until they're heavily penalised, I don't think that will stop.
Going back to your comment about picking up other people's trash, I had to go down these steps to the public dock, and I was picking up, must have been 2 to 3 bags full, and someone came down and they said, "Oh, you're picking up someone else's trash." And then they didn't help me take the bags up the hill either. It was just surprising, but we all need to do our part, and thank you very much for your talk.
Well, just to reassure you, that happened to me an enormous number of times, and I was sworn at, insulted, told that I'd lost the plot because I used to be the newspaper editor in the Isle of Man, and there I was picking up trash on the street, and they were saying, what the hell's happened to you? You used to be a well-respected newspaper editor, and now you're picking up trash. And now I would prefer to be respected for picking up trash than be a newspaper editor.
Hi there. My name is Val. I
Hi.
worked for the government for a number of years, and one of the projects we did back in the 80s was changing the old railway right-of-way into a railway trail. And
Yes.
it's 19 miles of the original 21 miles. And at one point, we had trail wardens who were like taking care of different areas. And certainly, as mentioned, we've had KBB and we've had rock watcher programs. I think a lot of people are individually doing something. They just go to Elbow Beach or somewhere and they walk and pick up trash, and that's done very quietly. It's not done as part of a group. And I know in the UK they also, my ex-husband's over there, and he works with Keep Britain Tidy. I think they do beach and river
Yes.
cleanups. So they are certainly there's other programs that are working, and I think they used apps on phones that really helped involve people as well.
Yeah,
But I guess I think it's important that we've protected about 10% of our open space on the island so far. But as you say, a private organization that's not government is sometimes more effective. And we've had
definitely.
this happen with the Friends of the Railway Trail who are reconnecting old bridges and things, and it's not through government. And we've also
I,
had that
I think
happen
that's
with National
really
Trust.
important point. That's a really
Yeah,
important point because the people said to us many times, "We're really happy to see you doing this. Why isn't the government doing anything about it?" But as I said before, I think if the government had been the ones to create beach buddies, then it would have been looked at as just another organization. It would have probably been massively overfunded. It would have cost a fortune as well. Whereas we run on a very small shoestring. But I think that without question, the way you've summed it up there is that if it's a community organization, then you'll get great backing for it. If it's run by the government, they just don't care. The public will just look on it as just another scheme by the government to try and win votes or to look good in people's eyes, whereas we were doing it for all the right reasons. And so, yeah, I share that point 100%.
yeah. What's happened here, I think, is that over the years, when land was purchased for one purpose, then it was taken for another purpose. So I was
Yes,
involved in a study. I did an assessment of a survey of about 2,500 people back in the year 2000, and we found that people had lost faith in the government. So when
yes,
the Audubon Society joined forces with the National Trust, and another BBB was Buy Back Bermuda, and that's been tremendously successful because it was not the government.
yes,
Because people knew
definitely.
that the National Trust, when they put something into perpetuity, that is it. When the Audubon Society does it, no one's ever going to take that land and use it for anything else. But the survey at the same time was saying that like 96% of people on the island did not want to see any further development. So the mandate was there. And although that the report, I don't know if it ever was published, but it wasn't published at the time. But I thought, I know the answer. I know this is going to be supported. It's going to work.
Yeah,
And it did. So, and having colorful bins and things is a really good idea. They've
it
done
is.
that
Yeah.
with, having your own identity, having competitions where kids can design or through a color scheme. I don't know what your bins look like, but I'll go and have a look afterwards. Um,
Yes.
and the other thing is if I can get an email address or something, I'm a songwriter as well. And I have a song called Teach the World, which
Wow.
talks about the plastic in the ocean. So
I'd love to hear that.
I did send it here in case they wanted to do something with it, but maybe I'll just
Okay.
share that with you. It's about Neil Burney, who did the Ocean Vet series for Bermuda, and it was a
Okay.
tribute to him. So anyway, thanks.
Okay. If you or anybody else who's watching this evening would like to get in touch, then our email address is on the website beachbuddies.net or on a Facebook page. We're on Instagram and we're on gosh, where else are we? Twitter. We're on Twitter as well. So just leave your email address on there, and we'll be very happy to correspond. And as I was saying in the presentation, I really think, and I've said this so many times, I think when we are all islands together and we understand these problems together, that if we unite with the same voice, I mean, as has just been said, the name Bermuda Beach Buddies, it just rings out beautifully, So I think why don't we do it? If we could sit and think about it for a long time. Why don't we just do it and make something happen?
Awesome. I think I've got just one more question for you. And I just want to say I like this idea that these islands can make a real difference. I always say in Bermuda, it's if we can't make a difference here, how is anybody in the rest of the world supposed to do that? And with our
Exactly.
unique position in the ocean and seeing
Exactly.
all of this trash coming, it's almost like our duty that we have because a lot of cities and stuff they don't understand the impact that the plastic is doing to the oceans and just the environments all around. And so, is there any last things that you would like to let us know about what you guys are doing, or a way in which that we can all band together and like the next steps for this? I love the
Uh,
sound of Beach Buddies Bermuda, um, and what that would entail with us if we wanted to start something like that here.
yeah, I mean, I've always tried very hard to keep the message as simple as possible because I could speak for ages, and you could just end up um, producing a whole pile of statistics and things which you can get swamped over with. I always try to get a message over which is simple and straight to the point, and hopefully inspirational to make people um, think that this is not a lost cause. Um,
No.
I keep saying that we stumbled on the answer here. When I look back on it, it was a little bit more than that, but in many ways, it was just something that was just an idea, and suddenly people like you guys in Bermuda are interviewing me. So it just shows you that these things can happen. You need to have a passion for it, um, and there's we mentioned earlier on about some organisations around the world who have beach cleaning. Like there's a Keep Britain Tidy organisation, but you know what? They only go out about once or twice a year. We're out 220, I think it was, times last year. I've
Oh,
got the
cool.
statistics right in front of me, but it's a huge number, and that's every weekend we go out. So we're going out, 45 plus weekends a year. We're running school events 2 or 3 times a week. We've got company. I ran 17 events in 7 days just recently.
Wow.
And you spread every time you take people out, you spread the word. So it is about communication, it's education, but it's all more to the point about everybody having a shared care for the planet and doing something together about it in a very simple, and believe me, it's a really enjoyable, lovely thing to do. And I've met some wonderful people along the way, and now met some great people here tonight as well. So thank you all for listening. It inspires me as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Bill. Thank you for sharing how the Isle of Man has obtained and retained its UNESCO Biosphere Reserve status and what other islands can do to position themselves to do the same. It's our hope that through your presentation, it inspires and encourages discussions throughout Bermuda and other island communities. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing this epic
Thank you.
journey. And I think, yeah, great role model for us to start doing some of the same here in Bermuda. But I'd also like to thank Chubb Bermuda, our sponsors of the BUEI Talks Island SOS series. Please join us next month for July 23rd at 4 p.m., where our focus will shift to balancing environmental protection with community and commercial interests in Trinidad and Tobago, with Liana Fanovich. She's the senior ecologist and the Environmental Research Institute in Charlottesville. I'm Hannah Horsfield. See you next time.